So we are starting chapter 6, which is very exciting, a brand new chapter. And once again, our shir is Leilui Nishmas Avram ben Yoni Yaakov and also Almog ben Yigal as well. And chapter 6 is on page 59. Now, just a warning that we are going to ask lots of questions, and it's unlikely we will get to the part where he's going to give all of the answers. I know that can be frustrating, but we will do our best to enjoy the questioning part. I often say this to the girls in school, that we need to enjoy the question. You know, living with the question is also something which is good. And then hopefully next week we will get to all of the answers. But let's see. So chapter 6 is called The Root of Evil. If ordeals involve a choice between good and bad, we must examine the nature of the bad. What is the root of evil in the world? How does improper use of free will interact with evil? When Adam chose to eat from the tree, how exactly did evil materialize? And what is the pathway which leads to its correction? Okay, so essentially, what we're trying to answer, the questions that we're dealing with is understanding the nature of the bad in this world. Where does it come from? What is its function? If the source from it is at the Garden of Eden, then how did that happen? Just, sort of from them doing one sin, one wrong thing. And then lastly, maybe one of the most exciting ones is, what is the pathway that leads to its correction? Is there a way that evil could actually be eradicated, that the bad things, whether it is people or it's just the distance from Hashem, whatever that evil is there a way that it's ever all going to be corrected and the whole world is going to be good? So let's have a look. The classic question which can be asked about the realm of evil is, how can evil manifest in a world which is an expression of a creator who is good? Meaning Hashem is only good. Hashem is the source of all goodness, and he is the source of everything in the world. The world is just essentially an expression of Hashem. We learned when we did the Ani Ma'amins last year, we learned the first one, that Hashem brings everything into being all of the time. The whole world continues to exist only because Hashem wills it to be so. In which case, how could it be that Hashem wills the badness to be in this world? How could it be that this evil exists in a world which is constantly just a reflection of God's will? He continues, if Hashem is infinite goodness and the world is no more than an emanation of his being, how can evil arise? We have an axiom that evil does not come down from above. Okay? Hashem is purely good. How could it be that there is evil in a world which is solely a result of his will and an expression of what he wants? Let's continue. The question of why evil exists in the world, meaning what the purpose is, that's perhaps easier to understand. Because if the purpose of our existence here is to grapple with moral tests and choose the good, there must be a possibility of choosing the bad. If bad were not a real alternative, we could not be considered free. Our correct actions would be inevitable. Top of page 60. Of course, it follows that if one is not free to do otherwise, there can be no credit for doing good. Reward and punishment would be absurd, and life would be a mechanical affair. One who remains at a friend's side when chained there cannot be praised for loyalty. That's compulsion. Right? The person is chained, he's forced. Therefore, evil exists in very real terms, and we're entirely free to choose it. So that when we don't, we're performing a meaningful human action. The price we must pay for the privilege of being able to freely choose good is the existence of freely available evil. And the degree of goodness which can be manifest is in direct proportion to the depth of the horror which evil can generate. Okay, so in answer to what the reason there has to be bad in this world, there has to be evil, that is easy to understand because he gives everything purpose and it makes our actions meaningful. This week, Parshas Yisro, we're going to read the giving of the Torah. And most of you probably heard the Medrash that says that before we receive the Torah, God holds Mount Sinai over us. Kafa aleim har kegigis, he holds it over us as if it was a barrel, held over the Jewish people's heads. And then he says, if you accept the Torah, then it will be good for you. And if not, this is going to be your burial place. Quite astonishing, right? They don't teach you this in primary school, and they're little kids, because it's quite threatening, right? What choice did we have? Wonderful. What an amazing choice we made, that we were going to decide to keep the Torah. It was that, or it was all over, essentially, right? What's going on? So the Meshech Chochmah in this week's parasha, the Maharal, they all say the same idea. They say there wasn't a literal Hashem holding the mountain over our heads. That didn't take place. We weren't threatened. We weren't forced. But they say very simply, it was the equivalent of the mountain being held over our heads because we saw God with such clarity. When you hear Hashem himself speak to you, when you have that thunder and lightning and that experience, which was, almost an outer body experience where you hear God's voice literally saying to you, I am Hashem who took you out of the land of Egypt, and everything you've seen, right? As the build up to this, the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea. How could you not accept this Torah? Because you know with 100% clarity that it's the truth. And therefore what Chazal, our sages, are trying to tell us is that actually we were left with no choice. Not because God threatened to kill us, but it was as if a mountain was held over our heads because we had such clarity of what the truth was. Now, if we would lead all of our lives like that, on the one hand, it would be wonderful because it would be so clear. It would be obvious what to do and everything would be crystal clear to us. But on the other hand, there would be no challenge. Every single thing that we did would be obvious that this is the good and this is the right thing, and it would be impossible for us to choose anything else. And in fact, that's why you see that later on there's a different acceptance of the Torah when we come to the Purim story. When we come to the Purim story where God is hidden, where there is no mention of his name in the whole of the Megillah, where there is no outright miracle, there is nothing which is supernatural, then we accept the Torah again. Because over there was no force. We weren't being forced in any way. And we didn't have absolute clarity. Everything was very murky. God was hidden throughout the story of the Megillah. And therefore, once again, demonstrating that actually, when God is so clear, then sometimes we're not left with any choice in life. We don't have those challenges which are going to build us. So the reason why there needs to be evil in the world, that part, it's clear. He continues, but be that as it may, it doesn't help us to understand our question. How does evil arise from a source which is pure good? Meaning, even if there's got to be evil in the world, but where does it come from if Hashem is purely good? This, the path of a serpent on a rock, is one of the great mysteries of creation. Perhaps we can attempt just the beginning of understanding, and to do this, we need to study the subject of the Mateh HaElokim, the staff which Moshe Rabbeinu carries in his hand. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you to shelve that question, okay, for the moment, which is how does evil come about if God is only good? And we're now going to go on to discussing the staff of Moshe, which we're going to see this appears throughout the narrative, throughout the whole of Yetzias Mitzrayim, for sure, the Exodus, and even from before that as well in the Torah. And we're going to learn a lesson from that staff, which is then going to help us to come back and be able to answer our original question about how evil exists in this world. Okay, bottom page 60. The more one looks into the nature and history of the staff, the more amazing and significant it becomes. It's a striking example of something which we regard as an unimportant detail or unessential. But of course, nothing in the Torah is unimportant. And when it features so often in the narrative, then certainly we've got to look into it. In the text itself, we find the staff in Moshe's hand at the burning bush. That's the first time we see it clearly mentioned in the Torah. Where it's transformed into a serpent after being thrown to the ground, it appears in Paro's court, where again it's superior to the staffs of the Egyptians, and we see it because it begins the plagues, it splits the sea, and later on in the desert brings water out of the rock. So this is what we see in the actual text itself in the Torah. It's mentioned a significant number of times, but there is much more from the Medrash. On page 61, the Mateh, says the Medrash, the staff was made of sapphire-like material engraved with Hashem's names and the initials of the 10 plagues, the one we say in Seder night, Ditzach, Adash, Ba'achav, the initials of each of the plagues. The engraving means that it is part of the essence of the object, not just applied onto it. It begins in the possession of Adam himself, at the creation of the worlds, passed down, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Egyptian Exodus, Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's then taken by the kings of Israel. Paro has it after Yosef's death, and it is snatched by Yisro, who drives it into the ground outside his home in Midian, where no one could extract it until Moshe easily drew it forth, which indicated to Yisro his tremendous spiritual power. You wondered where they got the story of the sword in the stone from. It was from the Medrash a long time earlier. Okay? So we see not only is this staff mentioned in the text of the Chumash, but there's also a number of different Midrashim about it. Let's continue. If we look more closely, we begin to sense something of enormous proportions being hinted at here. Moshe faces the burning bush. He was guilty of a slip. He said something inaccurate and inappropriate because he says the Jewish people are not going to believe me. Right? He says to the Jewish people, he says to Hashem, sorry, the Jewish people, V'hein lo ya'aminu li. Jewish people won't believe me. In response, when Hashem showed him a sign to use to prove his divine mission, then the sign takes the form of a snake, which is a reference to the sin of slander, of Lashon Hara. It was the serpent in Gan Eden, which misrepresented reality and caused Chava to sin. So therefore, Hashem is actually reprimanding Moshe. By the way, this is a lesson in leadership, if there ever was one. Believe in the people you are leading. And it's not just leadership, it's parenting, it's teaching, it's any profession, anywhere where you've got other people that you are working together with, where you're in some sort of position of leadership, and everyone has this at some point in some way, to believe in those people. And that was Moshe Rabbeinu's first lesson of leadership. Don't say, Hein lo ya'aminu li. Don't speak Lashon Hara about the Jewish people. Obviously, Moshe meant well. Moshe was just trying to be realistic. After 200 odd years of slavery, why are they going to believe little me? I come along and I say, we're going out. What are you talking about? This is Egypt. They've got the greatest, mightiest army in the world and holding us as slaves. So he's just being a realist. Says Hashem, they'll believe you. Have faith in the Jewish people was his number one lesson of leadership. It's the same in us as well. I see this. I can't tell you time and time and time again. If we don't have faith in people, we don't believe in people, then they certainly won't be able to rise up beyond what they're doing at the moment. If we have faith, we believe in them, we aim high, give them aspirations, time and again, they will surprise us. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was taught at the beginning of his leadership. And that's why there's a serpent, that's why there's a snake. It's not just an ordinary snake. Hashem commands Moshe to cast his staff to the ground and transforms this into a serpent, which is so terrifying, Moshe runs away from it. What does this mean? Moshe, the greatest man of all time, page 62. Certainly without mortal fear, he's speaking to Hashem, which means he's completely absorbed in that transcendent state of closeness to God, and now he's terrified of a staff, of a snake. What does this mean? We're forced to understand that what confronted him must have been indescribable and cosmic in its horror. And then Hashem commands him to grasp that snake by its tail. He does so, which is an act of self-control, and instantaneously manifests again as the staff. Again, the same type of sequence plays out when it comes to Paro. Moshe performs the same sequence in the presence of Paro, and the Midrashim describe the events surrounding the scene. Paro denies knowledge of God. He's shown the mater, the staff, becoming a serpent, and instead of being impressed, he gets all his advisors to do the same thing. He calls in his wife, he calls in the Egyptian school children who are 4 and 5 years old, and he gets them all to cast their staffs on the ground and transform them into serpents. They mock Moshe and Aaron and they say to them, why would you bring produce to sell in a market which is flooded already with it? It's overstocked. Your magic is commonplace, they say, belittling it as just magic. Moshe replies, the opposite is true. If you've got top quality produce, you take it to a well-stocked market where the dealers are expert so that its quality will stand out. They'll be able to be discerning. Aaron's staff then swallows up these serpents of the Egyptians after becoming a staff. So again, it goes back into a staff. Then it swallows up the other serpents. A double miracle. What does all of this mean? Meaning, what's going on here with the staff, which Moshe Rabbeinu turns into a serpent, then it turns back again. Then Moshe Rabbeinu goes to Paro, does the same thing. So Moshe grabs it and it turns back again. Then he goes to Paro, same thing happens. And his staff ends up turning back into a staff and then swallowing up the other staffs. What does this mean? 63. Let's try to perceive more deeply. Firstly, we notice there's this duality which comes up time and time again with the staff. It's engraved with Hashem's name, the name of all-encompassing kindness, but also with the plagues, the Tzach, Adash, Ba'achav, the initials of the plagues, which is Hashem's strict justice. It is used to perform miracles of salvation and sustenance for the Jewish people, but it acts as the rod of retribution. It is the one that carries out the plagues for the Egyptians. It punishes evil, but is capable of becoming an embodiment of evil itself. It is to serve Moshe as a sign to the Jewish people that proves Hashem's appearance, to assure him that they will believe, but also it's used to tell Moshe off for not believing in the Jewish people. In the hand, it's a manifestation of divine. Stretching back to the creation, cast to the earth, it is a manifestation of the primal evil, which also originates at the beginning of time. Meaning when you're holding it, then it's basically an extension of God. Basically, it's an extension of Hashem, and it's able almost to do anything, sort of supernaturally. When it's thrown back to the ground, it becomes a snake, which is the symbol of that original, the primal evil in Gan Eden. Let us go deeper, he says. There's an idea that evil is not created in the world. However, it is certainly made possible. Changing that possibility into a reality is our choice. If we do not pervert the world, it remains good. If we deflect it from its natural state, then we bring the evil into being. There's a mystical source which indicates the higher worlds are created straight, and this finite physical world represents a bending of that straightness, i.e., ultimately, at its highest level, everything is straight. Once a bend has occurred, there's a danger. When all is straight, no error can be made. When a bend manifests, error has not become inevitable, but has become possible. Okay? He's going to explain this a little better with a mashal, with a parable. If a person walks along a perfectly straight road, he can never lose sight of the point of origin. All you have to do is turn around and look back, and then you can see clearly where you came from. But when the road forks, once you have to turn onto a road at an angle, you can no longer see home. When you look back, page 64, you see only a lonely fork in the lonely road, and you can forget where the origin was. Similarly, that's how the world is built. The higher worlds are straight, and the angels see reality plainly, undeniably, clearly. But we see only the finite as a point of origin. If we want to see into the spiritual world, we have to be able to see around corners, into a dimension which is invisible from here. The very fact that our creation is finite hides the spiritual. And of course, this isn't bad. It provides the framework within which to exercise free will. We can look at the world and choose to see its incredible beauty, its plan and purpose, and its glow. That is the correct way to look through the smokescreen of the world, to penetrate it. But we can also see that it's only skin deep and it's finite, filled with random accidents, and that is bad. Good and bad lie only in the choice of perception. Again, what we're saying now is, in fact, maybe to answer our question, that evil doesn't actually exist intrinsically. Evil is just made possible, which means that it's in our hands to see a reality that doesn't have any evil, to see a reality that is entirely connected to its point of origin. Like we said, in the world is in a straight line, as the equivalent of when you've walked and walked and walked. You know, you've got on a run and you know exactly how far you need to get back. You know exactly how long it's going to take you because you're just coming back in a straight line. Everything is all aligned and it's all clear where the origin is. Or it could be like the person who's turned so many corners, you know, the maze where you've started off and you've turned this way, that way, right, left. You try and keep track of where you've come from so that you'll be able to make it back. And after a few more corners, then it's impossible to see because you can't see around those corners. And that is up to us. That is our perception. If we're able to see within this world, as it were, in a straight line to the spiritual world, then there is no evil, there is no bad, and everything is aligned and everything is connected. However, if we lose sight of that point of origin, if everything becomes just a corner which we can't see around, and we can never see back to that spiritual essence, and we can never see back to the creator of the world, then that's where bad begins to exist. You know, in school, we've been going through the morning brachas, and we also spoke about the Birchas HaShachar last week as well. The very first of those brachas is a beautiful example of this. Hanose nasech v'vina. We thank Hashem, we wake up in the morning for giving our brain, our intellect, the understanding to discern between day and night. Which means we wake up in the morning, we thank Hashem for the opportunity that a new day brings. Now, it's a beautiful way to start the day, and it sets the tone. Either we can just get out of bed, tell ourselves, come on, get up, get out, carry on with the day. It's up to you. It's what you make of it, etc., etc. All of those things. Or we can put it into a different perspective. Thank you, Hashem, for the opportunity that I have of having another day in order to be able to do things, in order to be able to move things forward, in order to be able to maybe make a fresh start from what I had yesterday. All of those things. You've given my mind the ability, the intellect to start again, to distinguish between what was yesterday and also what is today. As Eli said, yeah, beautiful. Thank before you think. Rabbi Sachs there, I think, was referring to Modeh Ani even. which comes even before, right? Moda ani lefanecha. We start off by thanking Hashem for the new day. That's a perception. That's about, waking up in the morning and you're immediately aligned. You're realigned. Where is all this coming from? What is going on in my day? What is happening in the world? Everything is aligned, and that's where I start my day. Only we're mindful of those things that we say, of those brachos that we say. They're a massive, massive help. It makes all the difference. Okay, we are going to stop there in the middle of page 64. Please God, we'll continue.